So what we have seen now is that our First Amendment press, the people who love the First Amendment the most, those folks have decided that cancel culture literally does not exist. It is not a reality. It does not exist in any way, shape, or form. And if you talk about it, it's because you're trying to distract. You really shouldn't be talking about cancellation and destruction and book burning. You shouldn't talk about any of that stuff, because if you talk about that stuff, it's a distraction from the real issues. Now, let's be quite clear about this. The book burning, the cancellation, all it is designed to do is create an ever-changing standard, a constantly shifting and moving line that anybody could find themselves on the wrong side of at any time. Because what that does is it creates an innate level of power for the institutional left. If they can cancel you at any time for any reason, then everybody lives in fear. They self-censor, which is what happened with the Dr. Seuss estate, right? They pulled down these books that were supposedly racist, which again, millions of people have read to their children. None of those, if anyone can provide me a study on how Dr. Seuss made kids more racist, I'm willing to hear it. Seriously, bring it. Bring me a piece of data. Name me the member of the alt-right who grew up looking at the page of If I Ran the Zoo over and over and over again to decide on white supremacy. It doesn't exist because that's stupid. Okay, same thing with McGillicuddy's Pool, which has like a fish that looks like an Eskimo, and this is supposed to be terrible. And to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street, which has a picture of a Chinese person holding chopsticks. Like, that has not made any single human being in the United States more racist. None. Okay, but if you sound off about this, then this means that you are racist yourself, right? And if you sound off about cancel culture generally, it's because you're not okay with American change, right? This is the case that I was talking about last week that was made repeatedly by members of the media. That really, if you're against things being canceled, what you're really in favor of is the racism, is the brutality, is the cruelty. Okay, cancel culture doesn't exist. So CNN had an entire segment with John Avlon and Margaret Hoover slamming the GOP and Fox News for focusing on Dr. Seuss. So again, it wasn't the GOP and Fox News that decided to get 6 Dr. Seuss books canceled. It was the left that decided to do that. And then the right said, I thought book burning was bad. And then the left says, why are you even focusing on book burning? Because book burning is bad. Let me explain it real slow for you. Book burning is bad. But apparently, even paying attention to it is just a distraction tactic. Here are the geniuses over at CNN.
Let's have a reality check about Dr. Seuss for 1 second. And I love Dr. Seuss. Was not canceled, okay? His estate decided they would stop publishing several books because they contained illustrations that most people, if looking at them objectively, would say, ooh, that's pretty racist. Now, you can debate on individual books, but let's have the individual images that cause the estate of Dr. Seuss to feel uncomfortable and have people defend them. This is not a cancel culture moment. This is a distraction play, and it should not be occupying so much headspace.
Okay, so this is the move that folks on the left like to make when they actually want to restrict rights. Think back to Charlie Hebdo. Remember the Charlie Hebdo shooting? So Islamist terrorists decided to murder a bunch of people at the French, essentially Mad Magazine Charlie Hebdo, because they drew a perverse picture of Muhammad in a sex act or something. And do you remember that the hashtag I am Charlie Hebdo trended in the West? Because the idea was that you may not like Charlie Hebdo. They drew a bunch of stuff that was, I thought, extraordinarily anti-Israel, bordering on the anti-Semitic. Okay, but they have every right to do that. I am Charlie Hebdo. The idea was that even stuff that you don't like ought to be defended as an exercise of free rights. Now, the move by CNN is the opposite. If you are not willing to defend a single Dr. Seuss page, right, the one that people are upset about, then this means that you are actually a hypocrite, right? You have to defend the page in order to defend the right of that book to still be distributed. Now, I'll be completely honest with you. I'm willing to defend If I Ran the Zoo as a book. I am willing to defend and to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street on the basis of a simple fact. Those books have not produced more racism in American society by any measurable level. By any measurable, you cannot find an individual who's been made more racist by If I Ran the Zoo. Not one, not a single human. Okay, in other words, you're looking for things to be offended by. And then when you find something that you are offended by, you say, isn't this objectively offensive? And then people who were never offended by it before, they go back and they're like, oh, that does look kind of uncomfortable. And then they say, let's get rid of the literature. That is not the way a free society ought to operate. Instead, people ought to be able to consume what they want to consume. And by the way, people can use their best judgment and know these materials are not making people more racist. It's absurd. It's an absurd contention. It always was an absurd contention. But the idea from CNN now is that if you don't love that particular picture in a Dr. Seuss book, how dare you criticize the Dr. Seuss estate for taking this stuff down? Okay, so Kevin McCarthy, the GOP leader, he decided to defend Dr. Seuss, who would read Green Eggs and Ham, which doesn't make a ton of sense to me because Green Eggs and Ham is not one of the books being canceled. I would have read, and to think I saw it on Mulberry Street, or if I ran the zoo, I would have just gotten up here and I just would have read it. Because again, even if I don't love those particular images, even I could see why somebody might find them offensive, they have not offended generations of children or made anybody racist. Okay, but Jake Tapper tweeted out, one of the weirdest parts of this culture war is that the self-styled warriors are unwilling to stand by the empirically racist images they're supposedly defending. Green Eggs and Ham is not one of the books the Dr. Seuss Foundation has decided to stop publishing. Okay, now here is where it gets weird. You don't even have to defend those books to defend the right of those books to be distributed. Right? You don't. You can actually say, I don't like those books. I don't want those books in my house, but people should be able to buy those books. That is true for virtually all books. And I think there are tons of books that offend me and I think are annoying and stupid. I don't think they should be banned. I think that objectively speaking, virtually all books written by members of the New York Times op-ed page are moronic. I don't think any of those should be banned. It's a bizarre contention, right? It's the same contention as we should get rid of freedom of speech because some people say the N-word. Okay, so I think that freedom of speech protects people saying the N-word. That doesn't mean they're protected from societal consequence, but freedom of speech does protect the N-word. Am I defending the N-word? No, I think the N-word is awful and evil. I don't think anybody should use it, black, white, or green. And I do understand the differences between people of different races using it. Okay, but I don't like the N-word. I think it's an ugly word, and I think it should be extirpated from our use of language. Does that mean that you don't have the right to say it? Of course you have the right to say it. You don't have to defend material in order to understand there is a right to use material or see material. That's an absurdity. Okay, but the move of the left is twofold. One is, you're not even willing to defend that picture, so that picture shouldn't exist. And two is, why are you even worrying about all this stuff? Sure, we're trying to cancel random stuff, but, what are you worried about? And the answer is, as you keep evolving the standard so as to maximize your own power, there is no standard. The standard just continues to get broader and broader. So over the weekend, we saw an attempt now to go after Speedy Gonzalez and Pepe Le Pew, right? Notice how they're going after all the kids stuff. Right? The reason they're going after all the kids stuff is because they only want their standards taught in school. So it is very dangerous for a kid ever to watch a Pepe Le Pew cartoon, but it is also dangerous for you not to teach your 4-year-old boy that he might be a 4-year-old girl. In fact, it is mandatory that you teach your child about cross-dressing when they're 5. Very important that you teach your kid about the virtues of cross-dressing. But if they watch a Bugs Bunny cartoon in which he cross-dresses for humorous purposes, then this is very bad and in fact terrible, and you can't do that. Don't worry, they're not trying to control your kid's mind. They're not trying to control how your kids are brought up. The same culture that says that Cardi B is excellent for teenagers says they cannot read a Dr. Seuss book lest they become racist. Yeah, I don't trust you guys. Well, Jahad Ali, who's an idiot columnist for the Daily Beast, he said, we are fighting about Speedy Gonzalez, Dr. Seuss, and Potato Head. The right wing is raising funds off it and will use it in 2022 for elections. 0 Republicans voted for the relief bill. Over 500,000 people are dead. There is a recession. What a dumb, nutty country. Well, I mean, first of all, why should they vote for the crappy relief bill? It was a bad relief bill. Over 500,000 people are dead and would be dead regardless of whether you were canceling people. It turns out that book burning is a bad idea. And so is going back and removing old cartoons. And you can show these to your kids or not show them to your kids, and you can contextualize them or not contextualize them. It is my job to raise my kid, not your job to raise my kid. This is the push. And again, if you think it's going to end with like a few Dr. Seuss books, here's the thing. They already showed their neck. They're going to come for Cat in the Hat. You know that's next. Right? They've already accused Cat in the Hat of minstrelsy in some bizarre iteration. Again, cancel, but don't worry. It's all in your head. Cancel culture doesn't exist. There's a piece by A.J. Willingham over at CNN called It's Time to Cancel This Talk of Cancel Culture. What exactly is cancel culture? Is it someone getting fired for harassment or problematic views? No, that's a workplace doing its job. Oh, is that what it is? Even though you didn't define problematic. Is it a popular figure losing fans or affiliations because of past actions? No, that's the power of public opinion. Or its cancellation, depending on the content of the past actions and its impact on their current job. My favorite part of this particular piece from CNN is that they actually cite, this idiot author actually cites Gina Carano as not being canceled because we hired her at Daily Wire. She was canceled, and then we hired her. And what do you not understand about this? But again, if you point out that there is a censorious move on the left, then you are somehow either delusional or participating in cruelty and malice. By the way, as far as Pepe Le Pew goes, the entire joke of Pepe Le Pew is that he was a pervert. That was the entire joke. He loses. Pepe Le Pew is a bad guy. That's the whole point of his character. People like Pepe Le Pew forwards rape culture. Again, show me the person who watched Pepe Le Pew and then raped somebody. Is this common in the rapist community? I'm unaware. It seems to me that if you're going to connect content with effect, which is what you guys love to do, right? You like to suggest that Donald Trump is responsible for a riot on the Capitol because he said stuff and then people ignored the peaceful part and went and rioted at the Capitol. But the content was connected with the action. So show me how the content was connected with the action with Pepe Le Pew. Show me the rapist who was desperately watching Pepe Le Pew late at night and then decided to go participate in quote unquote rape culture. It's so bizarre. And again, there's no end to it, of course. When they say that Dr. Seuss, so the original defense of the whole Dr. Seuss thing was, don't worry, we're just stopping the distribution of new books, but you can still go to the library and get the books. CBS then called up libraries and asked whether they would remove Dr. Seuss books. Okay, which is when journalists do this sort of stuff, when they call up libraries, when they get the intelligent idea to start calling places and asking whether they're going to remove material, that is not journalism, that is activism. It's a soft way of pressuring these libraries into doing just that. So they called up these places, and as it turns out, yes, there are now libraries that are going to start removing this stuff. Okay, that was breaking as of this morning. There are libraries who are going to start removing these books from the shelves so that you cannot see these terrible, terrible images. And if you think it stops there, it doesn't, of course. LeVar Burton, who used to be the Reading Rainbow guy. Now LeVar Burton's the ban the reading guy. He says, there's some Twain books that don't age particularly well. Maybe you should ban Huck Finn.
Talk about how you've seen this evolve over time. I'm sure there are books that maybe you've read or seen that were, popular or bestsellers that in retrospect you might look at and go, that didn't age very well.
Sure. Well, there are plenty. Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn.
They didn't age very well, guys. If they didn't age very well, probably we should remove them. Probably that's the best particular thing we could do, is just get rid of material. And we can indoctrinate your children at the same time by virtue of just cleansing the marketplace. We can just cleanse it. This is why California is now proposing to ban boys and girls sections at big retailers. You literally you'll go to a toy store and they won't have boys and girls sections anymore. It'll be banned. You'll be punished for saying that boys and girls are different. Even though, just a note, boys and girls are different and they don't like the same toys. I have a boy, I have two girls, and they don't like the same toys. And it makes it easier for me to shop when the toys are segregated by gender. That does not mean that I can't go over to the boys section and buy my kid a skateboard. I literally bought my daughter a skateboard yesterday. Okay, kind of a boy toy. So what? It's fine. But the notion that it's doing some sort of some terrible psychological harm, horrible harm, to have a boys and girls section of a toy store is idiotic in the extreme. But this is the culture we want. It has to do with indoctrination. It has to do with cramming down a particular vision of society. And it extends over into the tech sphere as well, by the way. Apparently, both Google and Urban Dictionary are now censoring particular terminology. One of those pieces of terminology that they are censoring is the term Blue Anon. So the term Blue Anon, which was used recently by our friend Candace Owens, that term refers to all the conspiracy theories the left has bought into over the past few years, right? Everything from the Russia collusion hoax to the Brett Kavanaugh rape stuff to Jussie Smollett to all of that. So Google and Urban Dictionary literally removed that term, Blue Anon. They took it down. I've never heard of a word being banned at any of these places, but apparently Google has censored searches for Blue Anon. You cannot even search for it now. Also, by the way, Google totally games its own system. Google is actively suppressing search results that do not acquiesce to traditional viewpoints of the left. I recommend that you install DuckDuckGo on your computer rather than Google as a way to combat all of this. So the left is changing how you can receive information. They're teaching what kind of materials your children can access. So yay on the transgender propaganda, nay on the old Dr. Seuss books. And we are all supposed to just acquiesce to this and pretend that this is not in any way a violation of individual freedom or a change to the culture that is bad. We're supposed to just say, well, that's the way the world works. Or we could stand up and just say no. That's the other thing we could do. Facts don't care about your feelings, and it's a fact that The Ben Shapiro Show is the largest conservative podcast in the nation. Be sure to hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on all of our content.